Hello and welcome to Beyond Biotech, the weekly podcast from Labiotech. I'm Dylan Kassane, and this is episode 141 for the podcast. This week, I had the pleasure to talk to Brian Culley, CEO of Lineage Cell Therapeutics. Lineage is a long-time player in the cell therapy space, and Brian is an industry veteran. I'm sure you'll find our conversation about stem cell therapy and its applications to spinal cord injuries interesting. Brian Culley, welcome to Beyond Biotech. Before we get going, Lineage is a listed company, right? Where can people go to learn more about the company?
Well, I'd like to remind your listeners that Lineage Cell Therapeutics is a publicly traded company, so they can learn about the risks and opportunities of investing in the company through our filings, which are available at sec.gov.
It would be great if we could start by just getting a bit of a rundown on who you are and how you found your way to being CEO of Lineage.
Well, thanks, Dylan. It's really nice to be here today. My background is in basic research. I used to be a drug hunter many years ago in the lab. I worked in academia and industry as a person who was looking for small molecules to treat various diseases. Over the years, I migrated through technology licensing and business development before having an opportunity to become CEO of what was then a cancer company. That journey continued for a number of years. I was working in the malaria space, which was really interesting, but there's not a lot of capital to do things in the malaria space. So I was looking for a more conventional job and was introduced by a recruiter to Lineage. I thought, wow, this is a really interesting company. There are a lot of things that a CEO could do to leave a mark, hopefully a positive one. And in my time here, I've just really become passionate about the potential for cell therapies to change how we treat certain diseases. So it's been a long and incredibly rewarding journey, both here at Lineage and throughout my career.
Tell me a little bit about Lineage. Can you just give sort of an overview of what you do there and what Lineage's mission is? Yeah,
Lineage is working to advance sort of a new frontier of medicine. So many people are familiar with cell therapy or feel they're familiar with cell therapy, but there's a certain form of it which we practice, and that is that we are essentially making replacement parts for people. So your body, my body, they're comprised of about 200 discrete cell types. And we can manufacture in the lab replacement versions of some of those cells. So, for example, if you needed cardiomyocytes, which are heart cells, to treat a certain condition, you might say, oh, if I could manufacture replacement heart cells and transplant them to the patient, I might be able to treat a disease. So we've found a number of applications of that, mostly in neural settings. So this would be the eye, the brain, spinal cord, the ear. Is a relatively new one. And it's really that simple. There are diseases or conditions where a certain cell type is destroyed or dies off, or you simply outlive it, and we can make replacement versions of those cells and give those to you in an effort to try to recover the normal function that you had before you lost the cells.
Can you tell me a little bit about Lineage, the company? Because like you said, it was one that you came to as CEO. How long has it been around? How long has it been established? How many people are working there?
Yeah, today we have approximately 75 employees. The company has existed literally for decades. It was one of the early innovators in this space. And it's interesting to me because many times people think, oh, this company's been around for 20 or 25 years and has never gotten a drug approved, and they see it as a negative. But I feel differently because when you're working in a new space, an innovative area, having decades of experience and learnings and lessons can actually be a real superpower for the field. So I think that we needed to see a convergence of a maturation of the field along with our own experiences to get where we are today. And it's really exciting now because as I look, sort of across the street or across the country or across the world, I see companies that sort of resemble us. They're doing very similar things and they're having a lot of success. So it's tremendously exciting to be working in a space, the cell transplantation space, at a time where it really seems to be accelerating in the hands of a lot of people simultaneously.
One of the areas that you're working in is to do with spinal cord injuries. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a background on that. Are they really prevalent? What causes them? How many people are touched by these sort of injuries?
Oh, it's a tremendously challenging and frankly a very sad situation. The global prevalence for spinal cord injuries is upwards of 20 million people. So you're talking about almost 1 million people a year suffering typically from things like falls and motor vehicle accidents. Here in the U.S., there are about 300,000 people who suffer from spinal cord injuries. So now you're talking about 18,000 people a year. And what makes this particularly frustrating is that unlike someone who perhaps develops lung cancer and says, well, I worked in a smoky bar in the 70s, and you can kind of connect the condition with the cause. Spinal cord injuries are so frustrating because nobody expects or anticipates that they will suffer from one. They're always coming out of left field. They're about 80% male. They tend to be younger, although older people also will suffer from falls and vehicular accidents. So it's tremendously expensive to the system. You can find people running up bills of 1 to 5 million, and it's tremendously common. And there's a real paucity of therapeutic options for individuals who suffer from these spinal cord injuries. And it robs people of their quality of life. It robs literally the person from their ability to move. And so, it's a real honor to work in this space. And unfortunately, there aren't enough people who do work in this space because it's tremendously important.
But I guess there's a bigger cost there as well, because if you're talking tens of thousands of people in the US and then millions around the world, there's also families on top of that, workplaces on top of that. There are a lot of adaptations that have to be done to have people re-enter the society and be able to live close to normal lives. Is there a more global cost that we can talk about there?
Yeah, there absolutely is, because certainly the caregiver numbers and they can vary. You can have someone who may require around the clock support to assist them with their daily living. And that actually gets to the heart of what we're trying to do. If you can improve someone's condition so that they can move from requiring full-time support to just part-time support. If you can get someone who can feed and use the bathroom independently, you really are saving a lot of capital, because you're able to get that person to be more self-sufficient. As people regain their activities with their upper extremities, they can find jobs. There's so many jobs now that are virtual. So if you can use a phone or a keyboard or speech to text, you can get back engaged into the workforce in a very conventional way. Whereas otherwise, there's an enormous feeling of isolation and separation from society. So yes, the cost goes far beyond the medicines and the equipment, and goes into all of the caregivers and tax revenues. It becomes quite a significant amount.
That being the case, what are the current treatment options? What do people have access to right now?
Well, the treatment options sort of break across two sides. You have the immediate treatment options. So these are like surgical interventions, surgical repair, and the medication that goes along with caring for someone shortly, in the hours, days, and weeks after an accident. And then you have the longer term care, right? Rehabilitation. You'll have physical therapy, occupational therapy. You might have speech therapy, all the assist devices. And then you can start to introduce some of the other interventions like electrostimulation or cell-based therapy. Brain chip interface has become a really hot topic recently. And so all of these potentially could work together, but not everyone has access to all of these. You've got people who might live, very far from a center of excellence. They might not have high quality insurance to be able to access this care. So the disparity across a patient and the patient's family and their caregiver's experience is actually quite diverse. What's really unfortunate is there is no silver bullet. There is no magic that can help someone, do away with their wheelchair. Most of us are really trying to drive some sort of incremental change in a person's functional abilities, because even small changes can be tremendously valuable to the individual in ways that you and I really don't appreciate. So, for example, just a quick side story. I went to visit a young man who was involved in our clinical trial. He lived in Chicago. I went to visit him at his home. He's living alone. And there are all sorts of just items around his home. And I said, Chris, what are these for? This device and metal pieces and everything. He said, oh, each of these connects me in a way from what I'm able to do to what I need to do. So, for example, if his shoe fell off, he had a particular device that helped him get his shoe back on. And that's not a product that you can go to Amazon and purchase, right? It's a very unique custom item for him. But it really highlighted for me that very small improvements in mobility can lead to meaningful changes in the quality of life of the individual. We need to entrust that the individuals have the creativity and the motivation and need to be able to find those use cases.
So if that's what's currently available, then what's the role or what's the place of stem cell therapies in helping people with these spinal cord injuries?
Well, our view of stem cell therapy, which is maybe different from what many listeners would think of. We do not take stem cells and put them into patients. We don't inject them into the bloodstream and hope for magical, anti-inflammatory properties. What we do is we just simply use stem cells as starting material because stem cells have two characteristics that are special. One is they are self-renewing, so we can have essentially an endless supply of them that we can generate in the lab. The other is that they are capable of turning into other cell types. So we'll take what are essentially blank stem cells and we will give them instructions in the lab. And over the course of many weeks, we can manufacture very large numbers of what are called oligodendrocyte progenitor cells, or OPCs. Now that's a different cell type. It's not a stem cell. It's actually the cell that you will find in the spinal cord of every human being, and it's responsible for manufacturing myelin. Myelin is it's sort of like the conductive sheath that goes around an axon. So you can imagine the reason that wires are wrapped in insulation is to help with their efficiency of conducting electrical information. Well, the human cells are really the same. So we are delivering to an individual millions of oligodendrocyte progenitor cells, which are the same cell type that is lost after an accident. So we're replacing that cell type in order to restore function. And the individual will accept those cells. They're put right onto the lesion, right to the site of injury, and hopefully they will work to help axonal regeneration and reconnection so that the signals that are going from the brain to the extremities can be detected and convert into intentional mobility.
So obviously you're already in the clinic then. You've passed through phase 1. Can you tell us a little bit about how that phase 1 trial went?
Yes, the first clinical trial of this technology was done in individuals with thoracic injuries. There were 5 people who had thoracic injuries. The technology was well tolerated. There weren't any unusual safety signals. And so the next trial was done in 25 individuals who had a cervical injury. So this is really a common type of injury up in the cervical nerves, running from about C3 to C7. Those patients, there were 25 of them. It was very exciting. There were cases that were unexpected. People had unexpectedly high recovery compared to what we would have expected with an untreated patient. And again, it was very safe and well tolerated. And so that was very exciting because you see phase 1 data, and the surgeons and the physical therapists are saying we think there's a benefit here. And we definitely saw people. There was a young man who couldn't even shrug his shoulders, and now he has the manual dexterity to actually cap a Cat5 cable. So if you think about all those 8 tiny little wires that go into a Cat5 cable in the back of your computer, he has that level of manual dexterity that he can replace those. So we were really excited, but there were a couple of things that needed to be done before we could move into a larger study, because we didn't particularly like how the cells were being delivered. In particular, patients needed to be disconnected from the respirator when they were receiving the cells. So that means they're not breathing, which means the surgery needs to go very quickly. So we're actually in the clinic now. We just last month opened up a new clinical study where we're evaluating a device. It's a really small device that attaches right to the patient and allows the cells to be delivered to the patient over 3 to 5 minutes, so much more slowly than before, because the device is connected to the patient. So as the patient's chest cavity is going up and down in connection with their breathing, the device and the needle and the flow path of the cells, that's all moving at the same time. So you're no longer racing against the clock to deliver the therapy. So we think that'll be much more deployable in a larger study and easier to use. So we're going to treat between 6 and 10 patients with this new device. And it was quite exciting that when we were talking to the FDA about it, we were encouraged to, for the first time, include patients who had chronic injuries. So rather than subacute injuries, which are occurring in just 21 to 42 days after the initial insult to the spinal cord, that's a subacute window. We're talking about people who maybe their injury was 1, 3, or even 5 years ago. The reason why that's exciting is those individuals will have plateaued. They're not gaining any more function. They're at a stable level. So if they're participating in our trial, if they do enjoy any benefit and we detect that benefit, that's really exciting because it opens up a whole new line of investigation about maybe it's not people who have recent injuries, but maybe we can help people who actually have older injuries. And that would be tremendously exciting for the field.
This new clinical trial, this is the DOST study. Am I saying that right? It's a DOST study?
Yes, that's the study of the new delivery device, yes.
Okay, and what's the primary objective there? What sort of endpoint are you looking for?
Really, it's just safety. The old way of delivering the cells had this big scaffold, and it was fixed. It was connected to the bed. It had many parts, and it was sort of complicated to use. The dose study is just showing that we can replace all of that scaffolding, that whole gantry system, with this tiny little unit. It's about the size of a loaf of bread. And so anytime you switch delivery tools, you need to demonstrate that those tools are safe and can perform as expected. So that's why this next clinical study is so small, just 6 to 10 patients, because we're really using the same material, but we're swapping out the way that material is delivered. And the needle part, the part that goes inside the body, that's all the same. This is really just simplifying the exterior side of it. So, rather than having a big desktop computer, wouldn't you like to have all that computational power in an iPhone? Yes. So that's really an analogy that you could apply for this DOST study.
Now, for this dose study, are you working with a particular hospital or a particular hospital group somewhere in the US?
The first site that we've opened is at UC San Diego Health. So that's right here in San Diego. So it's local to us, which offers some convenience. But we expect to open additional sites for this trial, principally in California. We have a nice relationship with the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine, which has been a supportive granting organization to this program in particular. We've received $14 million through that granting agency. So we do have a little bit of a bias for the California sites for that reason, but ultimately we have a plan to have this be a national program and even an international program when we reach larger and later stage studies.
Now, you explained that this new delivery method is a little bit slower. There's a lot less rush there. What's the advantage of that, besides just maybe taking some pressure off in surgery?
Yeah, there are other advantages. We're actually introducing a new formulation, so not the cells, but actually how the cells are prepared. So the old way of manufacturing and preparing the cells for surgery required hours of plating and handling and counting, and every step there introduces risk of infection, risk of error. In fact, there was a patient who received the wrong number of cells. There was a surgical error once years ago. So what we've done is we've established a different way of making the cells and preparing the cells, that now the cells are going from a frozen state to thawed and ready for injection in just 5 minutes. And it's important that that new formulation that allows you to go immediately into the patient is compatible with the new equipment. So the new equipment, we think, is not just about safety and more careful and slow delivery, avoiding efflux of cells out of the injection area, simplifying the surgical field that you're working in, but also being compatible with this new formulation, which is immediate use and off the shelf. And we've even added a new way of making the cells, which are making the cells much more pure. The control, the scale of production is much higher. So we've made a lot of improvements, and oftentimes these are sort of behind the scenes, and people take these things for granted, but they're necessary in order to have a product which reaches patients in an aggressive and effective way.
So what sort of a timeline are we talking about then with this new study? When should we be starting to see preliminary results?
Well, this will be an open label study, again, to show the safety and performance. Historically, we have shared data on an ongoing basis, so I would anticipate that during the year there would be some preliminary information. What's nice about this study is that the endpoint of safety occurs at just 30 days. So the primary object of this trial is a readout at 30 days, but we will continue following the patients for several years. We'll be looking for changes in function that may occur with these individuals. Typically, we think that the normal observational period for FDA is 12 months. So I think that would be an interesting time frame to see if there's any improvement in activity. But our corporate history has been to be very open and share data on an ongoing basis. And I would anticipate we would continue to behave in that way with this program as well.
And we're talking at the moment about small groups of patients. You're talking about 5, 6, a small number there. How are you going to actually address that once you start to move to these bigger clinical trials of phase 2 and phase 3, when you're going to have to scale manufacturing? Is that something you're going to do yourself? Are you going to work with partners?
Yeah, several things that are worth mentioning there. So manufacturing of cell therapies is extraordinarily complex, and we've become, I believe, one of the best in the world at our particular form of doing that. So I think any partner which we could engage in the future would almost certainly rely on us to be a manufacturing sort of center of excellence. We've seen that with a similar program we're doing, which we partnered with the global pharmaceutical company Roche. We continue to manufacture retina cells for the program that we partnered with Roche for vision loss due to macular degeneration. The comparable program with spinal cord, we think that there's a lot of value from addressing some of the limitations around delivery and formulation and cell production. And then ultimately, any partner that we might work with in the future, we would want to ensure that they have the capability, the expertise, the know-how, and also the capital to move this program through larger trials. Part of our work is ensuring that such program is ready for advanced stages of clinical testing. There sometimes are cases where companies get a little excited, they see some data and they say, oh, we're ready for late stage testing. And then a partner comes along and says, oh, no, you aren't. So we want to make sure we avoid that sort of situation. So we're doing the work to ensure that we have that sort of readiness. And that will include also designing a later stage study, because there have been some amazing advances in technology since people first began to look at spinal cord injury and treating spinal cord injury with complex biological material like cells. Even things like artificial intelligence are making their way into understanding and predicting how patients will perform over a certain period based on a certain kind of injury. There are technologies like bioinformatics that give you much more information about the material that you're delivering. So it's really exciting, because I think that the technological advancements of the last 5 or 6 years are putting companies like Lineage in a position to have a much higher probability of success than we would have with the first iterations of cell therapies, which were frankly quite limited and have not yet, in most cases, shown what everyone is hoping and expecting from them.
Now, Brian, you said you worked with and are working with Roche in a different therapeutic area. When it comes to these spinal cord injuries, is there a pharma company that you're working with or that you have worked with or that you're hoping to work with? Is there a partner out there for Lineage?
Well, it's part of our normal and customary and even routine work in developing assets, especially clinical stage assets, is to maintain an open conversation with partners. Oftentimes, what that looks like is you talk to a partner and they say, "Well, that's really interesting. Keep me informed. Like, check in from time to time. Let me know how things are going." These companies, the large ones and the small ones, are not static. Their priorities change, and so a company that might be uninterested in a program today, could get a new CEO and might become very interested in that program a week later. So it's really important to always have that back and forth conversation. We're not anticipating that we would partner before we see some of these problems solved. Some of the things that we are doing are not prohibitively expensive. So it makes sense to us to get this, just like someone who wants to sell their house, they're gonna trim the bushes, plant some roses, increase the curb appeal, and get better value. We want to make sure that we solve some of the easier problems so that if and when we work with someone in the future, which would be normal and consistent with our business, that we really are getting the best possible partner, and they're very excited about the program. And it's important also that they have the capabilities. As I said earlier on this call, there are not a large number of companies working in spinal cord injury, despite the fact that there's a tremendous unmet need. And so it's important for us to make sure that any partner is also committed. We have a duty to the individuals who are participating in our clinical trials and a duty to our shareholders to really do the best thing we can here. And so that's an important consideration with partners as well. We want to make sure a partner is equally committed to the furtherance of this program in spinal cord injury.
But beyond spinal cord injuries, what other medical conditions, what other therapeutic areas is Lineage looking at? Are there other areas where you think stem cell therapies can really add some value?
I absolutely think there are other areas where a cell-based technology can have a greater impact and better clinical outcomes than traditional small molecules and antibodies. And really, I need look no farther than the deal that we struck with Roche and Genentech for dry AMD, one of the leading causes of vision loss. In that condition, people lose a certain retina cell. So we manufacture those retina cells and transplant them to the eye. We have been able to show that we could increase vision in what is otherwise a disease where you only get worse. And so you don't need a large number of patients to see this clinical effect because it doesn't happen naturally. That led to a nearly $700 million alliance with Roche and Genentech. So we think that the eye is a great place, whether that's RPE cells or photoreceptors. We also have a newer initiative with auditory neurons for hearing loss. Same idea. You lose auditory neurons. I don't care how loud you yell or amplify sound. There's no connection. But if you can manufacture and transplant auditory neurons, you may be able to establish new connectivity to carry that signal into your brain and make sense of what that sound is. And we've looked and we've seen other companies working in areas like Parkinson's disease and transplanting dopaminergic neurons, or type 1 diabetes where you're transplanting in the islet cells of the pancreas. There are probably not 50 ideas that make sense to pursue, but there definitely are a handful that we're excited about and that we're working on. And then we look again at some comparable companies also having a lot of success. Cells seem to be very well tolerated. And so if you can manufacture the cell type, if you can get it into the patient, if it's not rejected, you stand a very reasonable chance of detecting some sort of change in their performance. And that's what makes this particular form of cell transplantation so much more exciting.
I mean, it sounds exciting. You sound excited. How close are we to actually bringing this into the mainstream, to have it be a therapy that is really accessible to more people?
Well, the spinal cord program will certainly take years of development still, but I have seen recently some advancements in comparable technologies. So if the question's about using cells, differentiated cells, replacing a specific functional cell, rather than a stem cell. We've already seen some examples that are reaching the clinic or close to it. Bayer, for example, just announced that they moved from a phase 1 program. They skipped over phase 2 and went right into phase 3, and they're the company that are making dopaminergic neurons to treat Parkinson's disease. So there's some real aggressive moves and good signs of success in the field. And, we hope to be a part of it. But unfortunately, because it is very important and, in fact, necessary to demonstrate with statistical evidence that your product works, which helps protect people from, products which don't work, the time required and the investment required to demonstrate that a treatment is giving a benefit to a patient and is safe relative to that improvement is many years and many millions, sometimes tens or even over $100 million of development costs. So it's a long, tough road, but it's so much better than, people flying into other countries and saying, give me a shot of stem cells in the arm and, here's $20,000 cash and I have no idea if it's going to work or not. That's not the business we're in, and it's unfortunate that those unregulated activities exist, but, the cost of proof is very high, but at least then the customer can have the confidence that they have something that's appropriate for their particular disease state or condition.
Yeah, so that cost of proof, that regulation, that's sort of a necessary break, if you like, on the speed at which this can move to the mainstream. Are there other practical or logistical handbrakes there when it comes to manufacturing at scale?
Yes, manufacturing at scale is a real challenge, especially the way that we are doing it. So we do what's called off the shelf. So we are developing one cell type. It comes from one cell line, and we have to make many, many, many doses from that one cell line. That's the only way to make this kind of technology affordable. There are some other technologies where you take cells from a patient, you manipulate them and put them back. Well, those cells are only made for one person. That's the difference between buying a suit off the rack and a suit that's custom tailored on Savile Row in London. So we really embrace the off-the-shelf approach. It's challenging, but it's not impossible. It takes some time, but we've had some great success with it to date. And what's nice about that is you're able to avoid this custom therapy issue, which when you look at some of the custom therapies in cancer treatment, $300,000, $500,000 or more, that's unsustainable. It really is incredibly expensive. It's life-saving in some cases, so I think it can be justified, but it really prohibits broad adoption by regular people. So if you can have a therapy that can be scaled and it can be off the shelf and essentially the same treatment for everyone, and it is expected to work for everyone, now if you can scale that product, you can really bring down the cost of goods and make it affordable for people and even affordable for the payers. So that's a really important aspect of our technology.
Brian, just one last question. If I came back to you in 18 months, where's Lineage going to be in 18 months' time?
We will be an undisputed leader in the new frontier of cell transplantation with compelling evidence in the clinic across multiple programs, high-quality partners, high-quality investors, and an exciting future even beyond those 18 months.
Brian, thanks for joining us on Beyond Biotech.
My pleasure, Dylan. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Don't forget to check out all the latest news and analysis at Labiotech.eu. I hope wherever you are in the world, you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Beyond Biotech.